when the company is employee owned, yes, the practice manager would still manage the workforce. However, the board is set up and the decision-making matrix is set up. But it is a common thing that when I speak with owners, they're concerned about. They're like, being a small business, that's part of what our competitive advantage is that we're nimble and we can make decisions and we manage in a certain way. And they're worried now that suddenly they would need everyone's input to decide if they need a new soap dispenser.
Hey, Lane, it has been a minute since we had a group practice revolution, isn't it?
Yeah, it really has been.
It really has been. So welcome back to the revolution. And I think I actually mentioned when we did our mid-year check-in that I met a friend and was like, I don't want to get married right now, but if you're interested in working on this thing with me. And we had a discussion last week and it was really cool. So I'm not disclosing anything just yet, but there's stuff working in the background. So if you, if you are like, but Sarah, I really do want this platform, I am working on it. Things need to be in their right time, but we still want to be able to have conversations, give you information about different ways to approach group practice. And today's episode is a very interesting episode along those lines. But before we get to that, if you would like to support the podcast, and I know you do, because otherwise, why would you be here? If you want to do that, couple ways you can. You can rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And whether it's Group Practice Revolution, you search that, or Conversations with a Wounded Healer, it's all in the same feed. You can subscribe to us on YouTube at Head Heart Biz Therapy. You can follow us on all the social medias except for X, because to Elon, at Head Heart Biz Therapy. You can hire me for speaking gigs. I talk about all sorts of things: shame, power, evolving the field of psychotherapy, supervision, all sorts of things. And you can hire me as a consultant for your group practice. If you are somebody who's really looking to embody your values and transform your leadership, look no further. Here I am. So, Lane, what did you think about my conversation with Donna Sky from Project Equity?
I always feel really excited when episodes like this one come out, because I think some of the nuts and bolts and reality pieces of how do we take a step outside of what is traditional business or capitalism and build something different or that feels more aligned. I just love these episodes for that reason, because I feel like I know very little about the reality of making a business like that come true. So I definitely was excited to hear from Donna and have her share some of her wisdom and expertise on the subject. So it sort of reminded me of your conversation with Ted Rao in that way. Yeah, I think at least in my head, the work that Ted does is sort of similar to what Donna does in a way. And so I really enjoyed it from that perspective, to get some more scaffolding around how to transform business.
Yeah. And just to differentiate for listeners, so Ted Rao is one of the founders of Sociocracy for All, and Project Equity supports businesses in shifting to employee ownership models. The governance and the ownership are different. And Donna and I talk a little bit about how that's true. And I think that's an important distinction, because it just is. And one of the things I was sort of thinking about as I was listening back to this episode is where we are in capitalism right now feels, I don't know if it's unique, but I don't know. It definitely feels more, God, how do I put this? Like we are at the brink of something. It feels like capitalism is pushing against something that is not going to last much longer, and something is going to break, right? Like I am so tired of having 8,000 apps to do anything. I am so we wanted other options other than cable, and now we all have like 800 streaming services, and we're paying like probably triple the amount we ever paid for cable in order to like watch all this TV. There are certain things that it feels like are on the brink, and I I'm really, really curious how group practices are going to fare through whatever ends up breaking in
Mhm.
capitalism. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing a really interesting thing happen on the Facebook groups. It seems like there are kind of two factions of people on the Facebook groups. And I'm just talking about therapists in general, not even group practice, but there's people who are really still trying to push the agenda of like, you can make X amount of money and you can scale your practice with ease and you can do all these things. And I'm like, please shut up right now. That's not the moment. And then I'm seeing people on the other side who are like accusing these people of being terrible, exploitative
Sure.
capitalists and all this sort of thing. I think it's somewhere in the middle, but like something is happening right
Yeah.
now and we are feeling it like a squeeze in this profession. And so I just wanted to note that. I don't know what the answers are, but I will actually point people towards an organization called the Post Growth Institute. They're an organization that's really trying to figure out what's going to happen after capitalism explodes. And who knows, employee owned groups might be one of the thing that saves us and gets us through. So let me tell you about
Mhm.
Donna. So, Donna Sky is a longtime social entrepreneur and business owner who believes business can be a force for positive change. She serves as senior manager of business and engagement and partnerships at Project Equity, where she helps business owners explore employee ownership and build more equitable, resilient workplaces. So, please enjoy my group practice revolution conversation with Donna Sky. Hello, Donna. Welcome to Group Practice Revolution.
Hello.
I'm really happy to have you today. I just to kind of like let listeners know, I am obviously consulting with a lot of group practices in the Chicago area, and several of them had mentioned working with you all at Project Equity, and so I reached out, and that's one of the reasons that you are here today, because you were willing to tell folks a little bit about what y'all are doing and help group practices really understand some additional ways that we might be in group practice together.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, well, tell people what it is that you're doing with Project Equity.
Yeah, so I work with an organization called Project Equity. We are a national nonprofit. So we work with business owners all over the country. We're based in California, but we have staff and businesses that we work with all over.
And not just therapy practices, all kinds of businesses,
Not just therapy practice, though we have
right?
been speaking to quite a few in recent months.
Do you have any idea why you think that is right now that a lot of therapy practices are coming to you?
Well, for a variety of reasons. What I'm hearing from the practice owners are that they're getting approached a lot by private equity or by individual buyers that are interested in their business. And it's sort of prompted, if they weren't already in a place to consider the next chapter for their business, it sort of prompted that question for them. So, when they reach out to us, usually they will indicate that and then they'll say, but, I'm worried about that option, though it might ultimately be the choice they make. They really are curious in general and are looking for, is there an alternative? And is there something that can help us ensure that the business would stay rooted in their local community and that the quality of the service they're providing to patients can continue?
Yeah. So what would you say that Project Equity does? How would you describe the services that you provide?
We really are sort of a holistic service provider in the space of employee ownership. We do everything from building out a policy map that helps the field in general for service providers and policymakers to look and see what are the laws and the practices that are in place right now all over the country. We'll work directly with the business owner to help them assess, what does an exit look like for them? What is a way that they could strengthen their business? What's a new way that they can operate their business where there's a shared ownership component? We also partner with a lot of different cities and organizations that support the small business sector in our country because they're hearing directly from the business owners what are my choices? How can I strengthen my business, or how can I really set it up for success if my plan is to leave?
Mm-hmm.
We also have a fund that can help finance the sales. So everything from, supporting the EO movement in general, working directly with business owners for technical assistance to help the actual sales and transitions, to helping to finance the deals as well.
Yeah. And I'll just say this plainly to any of the practice owners or employees that are listening. Like, what I'm hearing owners grapple with is the challenge of owning a practice right now feels a lot heavier than it used to. Obviously, all of this that's going on in the world and expectations of employees and just what's going on in the field. And so practice owners' choices are, I either close it, right, and just shut it all down and walk away. I sell it to someone I know who then takes over as a sole owner. I sell it to private equity, which for some of us that feels like selling it to the devil. And then this is the alternative option of making it an employee owned business. And I was kind of predicting that this would be a trend. And I had somebody actually reach out to me recently and say, like, hey, like, do you know anything about this? How would I do it? And so I'm really glad that you're here to tell us like more details about what that looks like. So what do owners need to know if they are really considering this as an option in general about like an employee owned business?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple ways to sort of think about that. The first, it really does start with the practice owner, for them to, start to think about, what do I want the next chapter to look like? I mean, the reality is we all have a finite period of time on this planet. And, at some point there will be the next chapter for your business. Some of us want that to be sooner than later in terms of leadership and ownership of the business. But even if you don't, it's coming, right? So how can you set up your business for success? So, take some time if you're a practice owner, and write down what's most important to you in an ideal world. What would you like that to look like? If you were to stay on, what would you want your practice to look like? If you were to leave, what would you need? And what's most important? Is it sale price? Is it, really being strategic around taxes? Is it preserving the jobs? Is it preserving the quality of the service? And if it's all of those, write all of those on the list.
Hmm.
Next would be to start to learn, learn about all of your options. Right now, some of your listeners may have heard there's a silver tsunami happening. And what
Oh, I don't know what this is. What is that?
the silver tsunami phenomenon is that over half of all privately owned businesses right now are owned by baby boomers. So,
Oh, sure.
yeah. So what that means is, there may be more businesses on the market for sale than there are buyers, as the flood of those individuals start to retire. So really knowing all of your options is more important than ever. So as I said, start to educate yourself. What would my options be? And for a lot of people, they don't know that selling to your employees could be an option. A common sort of myth around that is they think, well, my employees, maybe they don't have the money to buy
Right.
the business from me, or they don't have the leadership skills or the management skills to suddenly all make the decisions that a practice owner would need to make. But all of that is doable and can be addressed with employee ownership. So really start with educating yourself. And then if you're interested specifically about employee ownership, reach out. You can call us. I know our practice offers complimentary consultation calls. That's a lot of what I do, as well as my teammates on our business engagement team. So you can go right to our website. It's projectequity.org or project-equity.org, and have that complimentary consultation. There's also a lot of free resources on our website too, if you're not quite ready to make a call, where there's case studies and video interviews, and you can
Mm.
really learn from other owners around, how they made their choice.
What's involved in that initial consultation call?
It's pretty simple. You go onto the website, you'll sign up, you'll pick a time that works for you, and you'll meet with myself or someone else on our team, and I'll start to ask you some of those questions that I just mentioned. What's most important to you? What are your goals? Then we'll dig into the unique circumstances for your business. For some people, particularly when I'm speaking in, podcasts like this or at events, people want to know what is the very specific, how does it work? How much will I get? What's the multiple? What's that?
Right.
And we sort of have a saying at Project Equity, when you've seen one small business, you've seen one small business.
One small business. Right. Exactly.
And as I'm sure you know with your work, when you're consulting with the practice owners, that really talking about and understanding the specifics of your particular practice will be key in kind of guiding the conversation, because employee ownership is a big topic. There's multiple types of ownership. There's different ways that the sale could happen. So, we'll dig into that, and really, if possible, if you can come prepared with some information around the financial health of your business, that would be helpful. But really, it's not required for the first call.
What do the deals look like once make it through all the steps and at the end of the day, then you do become a employee owned business? How is that structured?
Yeah. Well, there are different types of employee owned entities. The three most common types are ESOPs, which are employee stock ownership plans, worker owned cooperatives, and employee ownership trust. So each one is set up a little bit different. All of them take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to have a full transition. And that includes, the different phases of how we recommend a transition like this comes to be, really, because as a selling owner, there's information you will receive along the way to help you decide, do I want to go to the next phase?
Hmm.
For example, when working with us, the first phase is that consultation phase where you're learning about our organization, how we could potentially support you in meeting your needs. We're learning about you. Most of the people I talk to, they're just in the beginning of exploring, what do I want for the future? Can this meet my needs? But sometimes we'll then invite that business owner to do the next phase, which is called a feasibility assessment. And at that phase, that's where a potential sale price would be provided to the owner. That's where we can help the practice owner present to all the employees.
Mhm.
And all of that is put into a report for the owner then to kind of sit with, and they'll have more of the information to know if, yes, this works and can help meet my needs, to move on to the transition. And then for the transition, that's where the new employee owned entity is designed. That's where, things like will decisions be made with the new employee owned entity? How would the board be set up? It's also where we structure the deal and where we secure the financing to help fund the sale. And then at the end of that, there's a sale that happens. All the I's are dotted,
Mhm.
they're crossed, and the sale is complete. And then the last phase is what we call our Thrive services. And that's where we really help to cultivate an employee ownership culture. So, being a co-op or an employee ownership trust or even an ESOP, they're all legal structures where your company is owned by the workers who are employed there. But having that culture and really leveraging the fact that you are employee owned to optimize those outcomes, really, it does take work. And we
Yeah.
help that in that phase.
Yeah. And I guess that's the piece too that I want employees to know as well. You can't just like first of all, snap your fingers and do all the business piece of it. And second of all, there is work on the other end of how do I, if I am sharing this with other people and I'm sharing in the stake of wanting to move this forward, I hear a lot of employees like, well, I want higher wages or I want, more benefits or whatever. But when you at the end of the day are seeing what the bottom line changes are in terms of profit, then that changes your stake in it. And so while it can, sound like, oh, well, of course this is the perfect idea, that level of risk and that level of responsibility might actually not be for everyone.
I think that is something that does come up for owners on calls. They'll say, well, if all of a sudden, everyone is an owner, does that mean then everyone contributes to all decisions? And can that really become a bottleneck or actually counterproductive? And the truth is, most employee owned entities still have that kind of management structure that was in place before they transitioned. The difference is there's a really activated governance layer. And what that means is right now you may have one or two owners of a business, and that owner, if they work in the company, they're owner operators. So they don't have a board of directors.
Right.
They manage the day-to-day operations, but they also act as the sole board. The
Right.
governance and the management sit in the same person. When a company becomes employee owned, you would still have either a general manager or, in the case of therapy practices, a practice manager. And that person would still make the day-to-day management decisions. They wouldn't be tapping everyone to decide, things that, frankly, the leader or the practice manager would make. However, anybody who is an employee owner would have a voice. And that voice could be simply voting for a few seats on the board of directors or serving on a board of directors, or if it's an employee ownership trust, there's also a trust stewardship committee. So they get to have a voice or a say in that. And now, when the company is employee owned, yes, the practice manager would still manage the workforce, but it could be quarterly, it could be twice a year. However, the board is set up and the decision making matrix is set up, that general manager or that practice manager would then report to the board things around earnings and any other type of big decision. For example, it might be if the general manager thinks it's a good idea to buy a building or move the practice or do something that is outlined in the new bylaws or operating agreement that having board input in is required, he or she would then bring it to the board. So it doesn't really actually lessen the manager's ability to make decisions, but it is a common thing that when I speak with owners, they're concerned about. They're like, being a small business, that's part of what our competitive advantage is that we're nimble and we can make decisions and we manage in a certain way. And they're worried now that suddenly they would need everyone's input
Right.
to decide if they need a new soap dispenser in the bathroom. Like that is a
Right.
decision that everyone would vote on.
Right, right. Have you actually seen people do more, whether it's sociocratic governance as well as part of this too, or do people usually stay with just the typical like management structure with the board and then have people vote in? I'm just curious.
Some practices, they may say, well, if there's a decision of a certain cost to the business or focus, we might want to have a few of the employees vote on that, but that's really on a case by case basis.
So I was just thinking too, when businesses are coming to you, what types of businesses are a good fit? And, feel free to talk about not just therapy practices, but of course, like any business, and then maybe narrow it into therapy businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that. So, what we've found is there's particular readiness factors that really are sort of the baseline indicator of when and if a business is really poised to be successful with an employee ownership transition or really ready to do an employee ownership transition. So, the first is financial health. Does the company have a history of profitability? In general, we recommend, are they revenue producing for at least 5 or more years? And have they been profitable for at least 3 or more of the last 5 years? So this is really for companies that do already have financial health. It's not a model for a sinking ship or a company that's really struggling already, because it does take work and it does take money to be able to finance these deals and to, support the company's ability to pay for the debt that's taken out to buy the business from the owner, and also have something left over to further incentivize the employee owners for the additional work they would do once they become employee owners. The next is workforce size. So, are there at least 10 or more full time employees? And in particular, for therapy practices, it's important to think of this as 10 or more permanent full time
Mhm.
employees. So, looking at not interns, though they are important to a lot of practices, for this, having that permanent full time employee is key. And then we often will say 15 or more employees when we're speaking about therapy practices, because each state has different rules around how and who can own a practice. And when you have a practice where there are several different licenses, maybe you have an LCSW, you also have an LPC or a PsyD and a psychologist, you could have a variety of different licenses. Sometimes finding the practice type that most of the workers have or employees have in the practice can be helpful in sort of the direction of how the transition will happen.
Mhm. And I can say, because I know someone that was working with you, and she was kinda talking with me behind the scenes about it, and I think it's that an LCPC and LCSW can't own a business together, and I'm guessing this is in Illinois specific, and I'm guessing also LMFTs, and so that's one of there's so many creative workarounds that it sounds like y'all have come up with, or I don't know if you've come up with them, but there are legal entities that can mitigate some of those gaps, but it's just, I mean, as you're talking about this, one of the things I would also say to practice owners is, because therapists love to figure out how to do it themselves. We are all parentified children. And so many times we're like, I can do this myself. But this is a thing I would not recommend anyone do on their own. And I also cannot do this for people. This is something that you really need to go to a service, an organization that's really skilled and has a lot of experience helping to transition these companies. This is not something that you just do on a whim.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And then again, specifically to practices, as you're hearing when speaking with different owners, each state has their own rules. And to your point about, who can own a practice together, there are ways to set up practices as employee owned if there are a variety of different licenses. That is possible. I just want to kind of clarify that
Right.
it is possible. It just varies by state what that legal structure would look like and how it would be done.
Have you experienced any like really good success stories? I don't know if you can share like a little, like, I don't know, a little rainbow at the end of our interview here for folks.
Well, there have been a lot of success stories. I mean, variety of business types, sizes, owners with different goals. There are definitely examples of business owners that are able to reach their retirement goals and dreams, and also examples of businesses where an owner tried to sell on the open market and they weren't able to, and then this became the path, and they're so happy they chose it. They were able to get that sell price that they wanted, and they have the pride in knowing that their legacy continues in their business. And then there's lots of examples of employees who maybe they weren't in a position to take the financial risk to start their own business. I mean, as you know, Sarah, you had your own practice, and in the beginning, those years can be lean. Um, as you're building your practice, as you're growing it, as you're building awareness of your business, it takes time. So there are examples of employee owners who maybe they weren't in that position to take that risk, and now they've learned so much professionally, and they've been able to participate in some of the financial upside of the business's success once they transition. So it can be a tremendous wealth building tool for the workers as well.
Amazing. Well, anything that I didn't ask that you feel is really important for people to know?
I think the first step is really think about what's important to you and then start to learn, educate. There's a lot of free resources out there that can help open your mind and inform you more as you make what can be one of the bigger decisions in your life, and definitely one of the bigger financial decisions that you'll make.
Absolutely. Well, will you share the website again so that people can make sure to check it out?
Definitely. Our website is www.project-equity.org, and I'm Donna Sky, so you can ask to speak with me, but my colleagues, Megan and Holden, are also available and very experienced as well, and would love to talk to you and learn more about your goals in your business.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you, kind of illuminating this potential path for people because I really want everybody to get a flavor of all of the things that are possible so we don't feel like we just have to stay stuck in this really challenging moment right now in group practice.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thank you.